part 2 of the paranormal experience. Fast forward to a few days later, I had seen Joe again. So then, at that point, I felt like I made the correlation that this could have been happening because it could have been related to the purses somehow. So then I asked him, where'd you get the purses from? And he had told me that they belonged to his ex-girlfriend. So from there, I had asked him, you know, is she still in the picture? Is she around here somewhere? And he had told me that she had herself a few years prior. And then I asked him for a photo. And he pulls out his wallet. And in the picture, it's him and her. And it's literally the same lady from my dream. That same exact lady. And my ex was standing right next to me as we were talking about this whole thing. And I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Like, I couldn't understand, I couldn't believe it. And so I ended up getting rid of the purses, and I haven't had anything like that happen ever since. Like, till this day, nothing else has ever happened like that since. Alright, so this is going to be another video to clear up any confusion for the last videos. The first thing that I wanted to clear up was I don't have access to the photo. I no longer talk to Joe. I've since moved far away. And secondly, it's not abnormal for someone to keep a picture of their deceased loved ones in their wallet. So I did end up telling him about the dream, and I'm not totally sure if he believed me or not, but my ex was there to back me up on the whole situation. And before I had donated the purses, I made sure that the purses were cleansed and everything. So, meaning the purses themselves had been cleansed by someone who practiced cleansing and the spiritual realm. In fact, she cleansed the whole house. So she took out all the rugs and put them outside, and then also put salt in all the doorways and the windowsills. And from there, we felt like that was the proper thing to do. And Joe did not want the purses to be thrown away. So, and at that time, he was cleaning her stuff out. So, you know, I would probably give away something like that too, to be honest. But, so it was something that we didn't expect, and I definitely didn't expect that to happen. It was a super crazy experience, and I think about it often till this day, and I really don't think that there was anything attached to the purses after that. Like I said, they were cleansed. So, and might I add as well, Joe was a very, very, very kind individual. He was super down to earth, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. And relating to her death, I'm not going to speak on that, but I will say it had something to do with water as well. If you guys have any more questions or feedback, let me know. I'm not used to filming TikToks and having them blow up, like, especially like this one did, so I'd be willing to make another video addressing anything. Alright, so here is another story time. I don't have the 10-minute option. I know that a few of my videos, people were asking for 10-minute option. So, unfortunately, I don't have that. So, I might have to make a part 2. But, here's another story time. And this takes place in a town called Oric, California. And I had went up there for vacation, and I was visiting my friend. And we were staying in this old house, and it was like a state-owned house related to his job. So I get there, and I immediately feel like the air is stale, like something's off. I just kind of brushed it off, like, oh, it's an old house, it's kind of creepy. Like, I was probably like freaking out a little bit because I didn't have any service, and I wasn't going to have any service for the duration of my time there. And so he had told me that his roommates might be coming at some point during the night. And I was like, oh yeah, it's fine, like, I'll sleep on the couch or whatever. There's three stories to this house, and we were on the second floor. We were sitting there, just hanging out, and all of a sudden we start hearing like forks clanking in the kitchen downstairs. We start hearing like the couch being moved around, and so he marks it off like, oh, my roommates must be home. So then he looks outside where the parking area was, and his roommates were not at home. And so I kind of get a little bit, like, I start to tense up quite a bit. And I was like, does this happen often? And he was like, yeah, like, this happens pretty often. And I was like, you do realize that, like, this isn't normal? Like, and he was like, oh, it's just an old house. Like, the creaks and the slams and everything, it's related to the old house. And I was like, so you're trying to tell me that the couch and all the furniture and the TV falling over and the forks and the spoons and everything, and like the drawers being opened, that was normal, and like that's a normal occurrence for you, and like it's an old house, so he wasn't acknowledging it. I was like, dude, Casper's like pretty much doing jumping jacks on the couch right now. Like, what do you mean? So unfortunately, during the middle of the night, I had to use the bathroom. And so I used the bathroom. Alright, so this is a part 2 to my last story time. If it's a little shaky, it's because I'm in Wyoming right now, and it's freezing. So I was in Oric. I was visiting my friend. We had noticed that some things started happening during the middle of the night, and my friend was basically like trying to dismiss everything that was happening inside the house. While we were on the second floor, everything was happening on the first floor. During the middle of the night, I ended up having to use the bathroom, and that's on the first floor. So I got up, we were still up and talking, whatever, and I had used the bathroom, and I was coming up the stairs. And I was coming up the first flight of stairs, and I noticed that they were very creaky. And again, I was like, it's an old house or whatever. But after I had started to move up the stairs, I heard a second set of footsteps after mine. And like, after I was taking every step, there would be another step and another creak. So I felt like the hair on my neck stood straight up. And I kind of looked at my friend, and he's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, what do you mean, what's wrong? What do you mean? Like, you heard that too. Like, you're standing right there. You fucking saw everything. And, my friend was still trying to dismiss the fact that Casper was having a rager downstairs. And, that whole night, I don't think I slept at all. I guess, like, he was used to it, and, like, in his mind, I get that he was, like, logically trying to dismiss it. It is an old house. It was built in, like, the early 1900s. And he didn't know any history behind it or anything like that. But at some point during the middle of the night, I woke up with a actual scratch on my face. and I called my grandma. She's, if you haven't noticed, like, she's the person I go to for pretty much everything. And I called my grandma and I explained to her everything. Like, I literally just stayed the night at the Conjuring house, pretty much. And I haven't been back since.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable, but is entirely true.
I lived in a house that was almost 300 years old, so let's talk about it. All right, so fun fact about this house that I lived in. My husband lived in this house when we were just dating for about 2 years back in 2015 to 2017, and then we moved to San Diego because we wanted to see what San Diego would bring to our lives, and then we moved back to the East Coast in 2021. So we were living on the East Coast, and mind you, when my husband lived there the first time, whenever I would go and visit him, if I would get there before he got home from work or from running errands, I just hated being there alone. The house just gave me the heebie-jeebies. So that was in 2015 to 2017. My husband just refuses to acknowledge that this house could be haunted, so he lived there peacefully. I was in shambles at all times. So fast forward to 2021, we moved back to the East Coast. We are staying with family while we're just trying to get our bearings and get new jobs and just transition back into life on the East Coast. And my husband is saying, you know, man, I really wish that that house was available again. I loved living there. It was the best. It was a dream because it was a pretty big space and the rent was really affordable, but it was haunted, so I didn't care. But anyway, my husband really wanted to move back. I said, not happening. So he went out on a limb and asked our old friend and neighbor who had lived there the entire time. She was there for almost 10 years. He followed up and just said, hey, do you know if our old unit is available or will be available? And she said, no, unfortunately, like the people have been living here, have been here for 2 years. They love it. I don't think they're going anywhere. Ironically enough, a few months later, and I think it was on Christmas Day, our old neighbor shoots at me a text and goes, hey, do you want to move back in? They're actually moving out. They're moving back down south. If you want it, I can, you know, put in a good word with the old landlord and just remind him that you guys were old tenants. It's looking pretty good for you guys to move back in. So we moved back. Yeah, we moved back. This time I felt a little bit better because we had Mona, my parrot, with us. So at least, you know, I had company, I had my BFF. So I didn't feel as scared, but I was still apprehensive, especially because even our neighbor was certain. Like, you know, she can verify that there was some weird stuff going on in this house. Just to preface, this house is a historic landmark. It was built in 1757, and a really famous blind poet lived there. I can't remember if she was born there. I know she didn't die there, but she was a blind hymn writer. Her name was Fanny Crosby. When you Google her, that's not who you want haunting your house, okay? Nothing personal, but good God, she was terrifying, okay? I'm just gonna say it, she was terrifying. I'm not even gonna, you know, put her on the green screen here and give anyone nightmares. I'm doing you a favor. Google at your own risk. She scares the hell out of me. And if she doesn't scare the hell out of you, must be nice. So I have plenty of stories of just my experience being there, but I'm just talking about one. Sorry it took me a while to get here, but I need to give you all the backstory. So we're living in this house, weird stuff is happening. Every time it happens, my husband justifies it with something ridiculous. But there was one night in particular, and ironically, it was the night of Halloween going into November 1st. If anyone knows of Samhain, if anyone knows anything about the veil thinning on the night of Halloween, then you know that sometimes activity is heightened, if you believe in that. So I'm in bed, and the layout of the house was you had your master bedroom, then there was the living room and the kitchen, and so I'm in the bedroom. Our door is closed every night because I just didn't like having that door open when I slept. I felt like people were watching me there, so, and the living room seemed to be the most active, so obviously I kept that door shut. Mona is in our bedroom with us because I'm not letting that poor bird be around ghosts by herself, so she slept in the bedroom with us in her cage because we needed her safe. And in the living room is her perch, her stand. And it was a really simple stand. Maybe if people are interested enough, I can show you what it looked like. But it was just a classic perch, and then it had this big hook, and on the hook you could hang a toy. So I would hang a toy, and it would usually have wooden bits, a chain, and then there's always a bell at the end, because a lot of bird toys have bells on them. See where I'm going here? So I'm in the bedroom, doors closed, and something wakes me up in the middle of the night. And I'm laying in bed, I'm trying to go back to sleep, and then I hear a bell chime from the living room, from Mona's perch, because that's the only bell in that room. And I don't think anything of it. I just think it was just a weird coincidence. Sometimes, I mean, the house was really old. Honestly, that house should be condemned, but that's another story. The house was really old. It could have been so many different things. So I try not to think into it because I'm already heightened at all times. So I just try to go back to sleep. But then I heard it again. I heard the bell chime again. And I'm laying there. And I'm questioning that very seriously. Then I hear it again. And we're not talking about a little like, doo-doo. We're talking about a bell chiming like, ching-ching-ching. Like take a little metal bell and whack it. And that bell is connected to things. So it's reverberating off the objects, whatever. The bell is ringing. And it's not a tiny bell. It's a bell designed for a 3-pound scarlet macaw or anything of a similar size. So it needs some force to hit it. So this bell is going off every 30 seconds. So finally, I'm like, okay, I'm officially terrified out of my mind. If it happens again, I'm waking up John because he's just sound asleep. Just sweet dreams. Sure enough, the bell chimes again. And I shake John and I say, the bell is going off in the living room. And he's very tired. He's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, Mona's bell is ringing in the living room. And she's clearly in here with us sleeping. She's covered in her cage. It's not coming from here. It's coming from the living room. He's like, no, it's not. And the bell chimes. And when I tell you that this man shot out of bed, somehow had a flashlight already in hand and goes into the living room and he's looking around and he can't find anything. No evidence of what could be making the bell chime. Have no idea what was causing that. But he comes back in the room with the pole and the toy attached to the pole in his hand, and he puts it in the closet and he gets back into bed, and all he says is, that was weird, and goes to sleep. He just goes right back to sleep. Obviously, I didn't sleep well that night. And the next day when I tried to bring it back up to him, my man's tried to chalk it up to, well, sometimes we get mice in the house, so a mouse could have done that. Mice are this big and weigh next to nothing, and there is absolutely nothing they can do to create enough power and force to make that bell chime. So yeah, that was weird. I hated living there, especially ever since that. So we don't live there anymore. But yeah, that was really weird. Just bells chiming in the middle of the night.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, and I'll go second. So growing up throughout high school, I lived in a family home with my mom that used to be my great-grandparents' house. So my mom's grandparents' house. I feel like I've always had this strong ability to sense things around me. I also don't want to sound like super duper like hippy dippy right now, but it's true. And throughout the time that I lived in this house, I always felt something, always. And there was one event that changed everything, and really confirmed to me that what I was feeling was true and that the paranormal is real. So going into that story, whenever you enter the house, so it's like the front door, and then you were greeted with a staircase. It was like a little bit to the left when you walked in, but it was basically right when you opened the door. Up those stairs, to the right was my bedroom, to the left was another bedroom that was more of an office for us, and then straight from the stairs, like going up straight ahead, was a smaller room that we turned into like a walk-in closet kind of deal. And there wasn't any bathroom upstairs, so the only bathroom in the house was downstairs. So if I had to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I had to wake up, go down the stairs, go to the bathroom, go back up the stairs, go back to bed. There was one night where I had to pee so bad. so bad. And usually I would just hold it because, and I probably had UTIs for that reason, but I would hold it because I didn't want to go downstairs because I was scared to death. I could just feel everything. And so one night I woke up, opened up my bedroom door, went to turn to go down the steps. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Went to turn to go down the steps. And at the end of the steps, there was a woman standing there. She had her arms crossed like this. She had super long black hair. She was wearing like a drapery kind of frumpy outfit. And as soon as I turned the corner to go down, she turned her head like this. Her arms were still crossed. She turned her head, looked up at me, gave me like a smirk, and then turned back around to look out the window of the front door. I was frozen. I could cry thinking about it right now. I was frozen. Frozen in fear to where I felt like I couldn't scream, but also frozen in a sense of like my fight or flight kind of kicked in. So slammed my door, ran back into the bed under the covers, sobbing, calling my mom. I was telling her, there's somebody in this house. Somebody has broken in. You need to call the police. Call 911. There's somebody in this house. I could hear her getting up, turning on all the lights, saying, hello, hello, is anybody here? She comes upstairs. She's like, there's nobody here. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And from that day on, I slept in bed with my mom throughout high school because I was deathly afraid. Not that this being was scary looking, but the fact that like I saw her was insane. There was a ton of other stuff that happened in this house that just made me feel uncomfortable. There was stuff that my mom came out and told me, but not until after I moved out of the house, because why would she want to scare me even more? There was just so much. I have so many other stories, but that is my main one that really just like sealed the deal for me. It was crazy. But yeah, that's my story.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go.
So I have a story from when I was 17 years old that to this day is unsettling to me and scary, and I still don't even know what to make of it, to be honest. But when I was 17, my best friend at the time, Matt, wanted to go visit his brother in Mississippi. Matt's brother was stationed in Mississippi with the Navy, and he lived in this house with his girlfriend and this other guy who was a Navy SEAL. I never met him, but I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, so the whole plan was to go to Mississippi, hang out with Matt's brother, and then we were gonna go to New Orleans and go hang out on Bourbon Street and do all that. The drive was about 2 or 3 hours for me and Matt. So while we're driving there, Matt decides to tell me then, hey, by the way, my brother's house is haunted, ha 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 ha. They've been having some problems, you know, isn't that crazy? And I immediately got irritated that he didn't tell me that before. And if you guys don't know this about me, I grew up in a haunted house, and my parents had to have priests come through and bless the home and all that. So there's history there for me, and it's just uncomfy to me, and I don't want to be around it. And that's it. So we end up getting there. I meet Matt's brother and his brother's girlfriend, and they're super cool, and we're all talking, hanging out. They're telling us about, you know, what's been going on and all that stuff, and it was getting really bad for them. But they end up telling us a story about what happened in that house. And the story is really sad because it was a mother and her son, and the son was playing in the driveway, and he ran into the street and got hit by a car and passed away. And the mother, being depressed, on the ceiling fan in the living room. Guess where me and Matt were sleeping? In the living room, underneath the ceiling fan. And yeah, so first night, Matt decides to get really drunk, and everyone else goes to sleep. It's midnight, Matt blacks out, and he's dead asleep. And I'm laying on the floor in the living room next to Matt. We had blankets and pillows, and we had a big flat screen TV in front of us, and I put on something happy. And I put on the movie Jackass. And I'm sitting there and I'm slowly nodding off. And do you know when you're sitting at night in front of a TV screen and you can kind of see the light flashing over your eyelids? You can like see the screen almost. So yeah, I was seeing that. So as I'm falling asleep, I start feeling footsteps pressing into the carpet around my body. And I thought it was maybe Matt. So I turn and look, and Matt's sleeping. So it wasn't Matt. And the footsteps keep walking around my body, especially around my face. I feel the carpet pressing in around me. And my body goes into this state of fear. I was like frozen. I felt paralyzed and I didn't know what to do. And next thing you know, the screen in front of me goes black and I can hear Jackass playing, but it's just black. And I feel a heavy presence standing over me. And it felt like there was somebody standing over me, which is so unsettling to think about. And I start praying. That's like the only thing I feel like I was able to do. I just started like praying, like, God, protect me, like put a veil over me. I don't wanna see this, like, please go away. I didn't know what to do. And I end up falling asleep. Don't know how, but I did. And yeah, we wake up. I told them what happened. They're like, oh yeah, that's, you know, she walks through the hallway, she walks through the living room. And I was like, okay, that's creepy. So fast forward to the middle of the day. Matt's brother and his girlfriend, they go to work, and me and Matt are just hanging out at the house. We're in a good mood. We're not even thinking about anything. And we're sitting in the kitchen. So we're sitting in this round table in the back. So basically I'm sitting here and Matt is you. And behind me is a doorway, like a little bit further back behind me. And it goes to like the front door and then the hallway down to the bedrooms and then the living room. So me and Matt are eating boiled peanuts, talking, laughing. I have photos from this day and we're in a great mood. And Matt looks right past me and he goes, I'll name Matt's brother's girlfriend, Sarah. He goes, Sarah. And I'm like, Matt, Sarah's not here. And he goes, Sarah. And I was like, Matt, Sarah's not here. And then the door slams at the end of the hallway. And me and Matt spring up without saying a word to each other and haul ass out of that house. I've never ran so fast in my life, like genuinely. Like we sat outside of that house until his brother and his brother's girlfriend came back. And we did not go back in until they came back, and we told them what happened. And they said, like, it's normal, it's been happening, and it's creepy. So that's pretty much all we experienced, at least that I can remember. And fast forward to what I heard is that Matt's brother and his girlfriend at that time, they ended up having to move out of that house. The Navy had to move homes for them because it got really aggressive, and whatever they were dealing with in there did not want them there. And yeah, that was not Sarah, and it was really unsettling for me. And yeah, to this day I don't really know how to explain it, but I thought it was really creepy.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
So basically, when I was about 16, my brother was 12 at the time, and we were in my room. It was nighttime, and he asked to sleep with me because he was scared. So I told him he could make a bed on the floor, and we would have a sleepover. And that's what we did. We went to sleep. Everything was fine. And I guess 3 to 4 a.m. rolls around, and I jump out of a dead sleep. I was not dreaming. Nothing made a sound. Nothing. There was nothing that should have woken me up, but I woke up. And I looked next to me, and standing directly next to my bed was the figure of a person. I couldn't see details because it was dark, but I could see the shadow of the head and the shoulders and everything just standing next to my bed. And I assumed that this was my little brother wanting to get in bed with me because he was scared or couldn't sleep or whatever. So I scooted over and I patted on the bed like this. And I watched this figure get into my bed. I felt the bed move. I felt it shift around, like with the weight of this person. And, up to this point, I'm still thinking it's my brother until I hear my little brother snoring.
on the floor. And immediately I had chills down my spine. I was physically nauseous and I kind of just froze. So I got underneath my blanket like this and I laid there like that until I passed out, eventually from exhaustion. I got up the next morning and I went screaming and crying to my mom, and I've never, ever, ever slept without a light on since. Nor will I ever again. Like, it just makes me sick, and that's not the first or last thing that has happened, but that's definitely the worst for me. So, yeah.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I was about 8 years old when I woke up in the dead of the night to a ghost standing next to me in bed. She was a little girl and she had a mess of blonde curly hair and a white pinafore dress. And she said, "You need to go check on Mom. She's not okay." And it scared me. And I jumped out of bed and literally ran right through her to meet my brother, who was 11 years older. So he was about 19, 20 years old, at the end of the stairs. And he's like, "What are you doing up?" And I told him, and he said, "That's really weird because I just had a dream of that same little girl telling me that I needed to check on Mom and that she would be okay." And we both ran into my mom's bedroom. She was doubled over in her bathroom having a miscarriage. We got her to the hospital. She was bleeding quite heavily. And they said that if we hadn't gotten her to the hospital, that she likely would have died. But it gets a little bit even weirder after that. It was several years after that that I ended up having a dream with this same little girl in it. My brother, who was now living very far away, had a dream with this same little girl in it. And it was, again, a forewarning with regards to our mom. And so my brother called me and said, "Did you have the dream?" And I said, "I did." And he said, "You need to check on Mom right now." And so I did. And she had attempted to take her life. And I got her to the hospital in time. We sort of believe that that little girl was the child that she miscarried, but had to take on the job of being my mom's guardian angel. I haven't seen her since. So that's my ghost story, or my angel story, and it's completely true.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I once woke up and I thought that I was having sleep paralysis in the middle of the night because I could hear crying on the other side of this wall that is shared by my living room. So I could hear crying in the living room, and I thought that I was the only one who could hear it. And the entire time that the crying is happening, I couldn't move or breathe or speak until it stopped. And then I rolled over. I was going to go back to bed, and I hear my mom's door open and check up on our dog, who was in the hallway asleep. And he had no reaction to this, which is crazy because he usually barks at every noise he hears. So that's another reason why I thought that only I had heard it. But the next day, my mom is driving me to school, and she asked me if I heard the crying in the living room because her and her boyfriend were about to go to bed, and they heard this weird sound coming from the living room that sounded like crying. And it happened 2 more times after that, and then it never happened again. And I still don't know what that was, and I think about it a lot.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
I was once playing with my dog in our hallway, and the hallway leads into our dining area and our living room. And I was playing with him. I was just throwing a little ball around with him. I'm on the floor. And at one point I threw the ball and he didn't grab it, and it went down the hallway and it sort of turned into our dining area. So I was not about to go under the table and move the chairs and grab the ball. And so I was just going to get up, and that was going to be the end of our playtime. But a couple seconds later, the ball was returned to us. And it scared my dog so bad. He could not stop barking. It freaked him out really bad. And I don't think we ever played in the hall like that ever again, because it, like, whatever was in the dining area just like rolled the ball back to us, and it had enough force that it reached me, and I was further down the hall, not at all even close to the kitchen or the dining area or the living room.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but isn't.
I could do so many more of these, but I used to live in an apartment where the living room and the dining room and the kitchen were all in one space. So if you were sitting on the couch, you could look into the kitchen. And one night I was laying on the couch, I was on my phone, and from the wall behind me, I hear heavy footsteps exit the bedroom, go past the couch, go around the island separating the living room from the kitchen, open my fridge door, and then slam it shut. And it was so freaky because I could see that the fridge was being opened because I could see the light from the inside of the fridge. And I don't know what it was, but just based on the heaviness of the footsteps, I think it was a man in my house. I don't know.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Trigger warning, I'm going to mention, it's taken me so long to tell this full story because it's genuinely one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. So when me and my husband bought our first house, things started to get weird very quickly, but it took about 2 years before it all came to a head. The first thing that I noticed is every morning when I woke up, even though I had tucked all the chairs into the kitchen table, one chair was always in the same chair, was always taken out from the table and facing down the hallway, which was where all the bedrooms were. That happened for a while, and it took me a minute to pick up on the fact that it wasn't my husband doing it, and my husband picking up on the fact that it wasn't me. Then I started to walk down the hallway like at night, and I would see the chair facing me, and nobody's sitting in it, but in the reflection of the like window right beside the table, there was always an old man sitting in the chair. I didn't think anything of it because he didn't seem to creep me out, like timelines passing, whatever. Then one night I'm having a dream, a sleep paralysis dream, so I'm like awake, but not really. And I see a shadow, a very tall, like 8 foot, very skinny shadow standing and leaning over my husband like this. He's sleeping. The next morning when my husband wakes up, I told him, like, I saw the craziest thing standing over you. I don't mean to scare you, but I saw something. And he was like, stop, because I had a dream that I opened my eyes and there was nothing but like black staring at me. And then I told him what I saw. And like, I mean, you just like that kind of coincidence. A few months go by and then we're sitting in the living room, and this is a house that was built in the 60s. So we had this like big bay window in the living room, and we were on an acre, and basically all of that acre was our front yard. And we hear scratching on the front window, on the outside of the front window. And it wasn't anything like a raccoon, or it could have been anything like that. We were still in a neighborhood. And that just wasn't something we often saw. I mean, the front porch was literally like this big. I wouldn't even call it a porch. So me and him get kind of like uncomfortable and weird. We're like, let's go back to the bedroom. We go back to the bedroom and we lay down, and all of a sudden we hear such a loud bang. We thought that both of our bookshelves, we had like 8 foot tall bookshelves in our living room with we collect old books and like all the old National Geographics. We heard them fall, and both of our cats went running to the back of our house. They came running under our bed. And so we slam the door. We start kind of like game planning, like, what do we do? What do we do? We're thinking somebody's in the house. They just like busted our door down and the bookshelves fell, like something's going on. We get some protection and we go out to like see what's happening. Nothing was out of place. Nothing had fallen. Nothing. And we know we weren't crazy because our cats reacted. Then I had a baby and I brought her home, and babies always stare and do weird stuff. But one of my first viral videos was her staring behind me like this. I had her on my knees and she was looking behind me, and she's laughing and playing with something behind me. And as I pan the camera, you see white movement like right here. The video's on TikTok, so we can find it. I would say about a month after that, I was rocking her in her room at night. I was fully awake. I was not dreaming. I was not sleepy. Like, I'm full mom mode. I'm up. Her bedroom looked all the way down the hallway where that chair is facing me, as it has for the last 2 years that we lived there. And as I look up into the hallway, I see facing the corner, like looking into my bedroom, because her room's here and my bedroom's like here. So standing, looking into my bedroom where I'm in her bedroom, is a full-on hooved, extremely tall, horned. I immediately start praying. I immediately out loud start praying. And of course, this is at 3 a.m. So the next morning, I tell my husband, I saw something crazy. I'm getting out of here. And he said that he looked over on the monitor at about 3 a.m. and he saw something moving around in the bedroom. Mind you, this is when I was rocking her, and the monitor does not face the rocking chair. So I loaded up my baby. We went to a Catholic church, and I got christened. I got a christened cross, a christened blessing. I filled up a whole water bottle and 2 little Tupperware things of holy water. I had an entire, like, the cross hanging on the entryway of our house. I walked around. I had one of my Catholic friends come over and bless our home. I walked around dousing holy water and praying over the entire house. I bathed my daughter in holy water. I bathed her in holy water. That's how much holy water I got. They probably thought that I was insane. And then every night before bed, I would bless her head, and I would bless every single one of, like, me and my husband and every doorway in our house. After that, we never had another incident. To this day, it's one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me, and I still carry that cross around. It's about this big, but it comes with us no matter where we live, and it's always over the entryway that leads to our bedrooms.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So my house growing up was built in 1919, and there was like a lot of stuff that would happen in the house, but there was only one time that something happened that like was a shared experience with my dad and I. So in this house, the couch was opposite the staircase. So the TV was like right under the staircase, and my dad and I were watching TV, and there was just some sort of like shadow that flew down the stairs. And at the time, we also had a baby gate going into the porch room, like the little sunroom in the front. And as it went through the baby gate, it fell. And then all the dogs just started like going crazy, ran into the porch room, and me and my dad just looked at each other like, the fuck was that?
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
I've got one for you. I have tried to stitch this video about 5 times and it's not working out. So, to preface, I have been extremely intuitive my whole entire life. My maternal grandfather passed away when I was 3. And so my mom woke me up in the middle of the night to go to the hospital to go see her dad as he was actively, going to the Lord, and she kissed me on the forehead. I woke up out of a dead sleep and looked my mom in the eyes at 3 years old and said, "Papa is going to heaven today." And he did. So from there on, I have seen numerous things, and that's a story for another day, but this one is about my Papa Gene. So I had a grandfather that was my step-grandfather, but I considered him, we were so close that he was my grandfather. Every summer, I would go up to Alabama. We're from Florida. Every summer, I would go up there for like a month or 2 and spend the entire summer with them, with my grandmother and with my Papa Gene, and he would cook me bacon, and we were just so close. We had this soul connection that just could never be torn apart. We were extremely, extremely close. So he knew right before he was about to pass, which is so crazy to me because he wrote in his journal about heaven and what it looked like. He was very, very religious, very Christian man, amazing voice. He sang at the church. He was just such a godly man. And he knew he was about to pass. And unfortunately, he passed away at the age of 60. But he was having visions of heaven, was writing them down. And he came to come see us the weekend before he passed away. He passed away on a Friday, and they came that weekend. They drove the 8 hours. And my grandmother was like, "Are you sure, Gene?" And he was like, "Yes, we have to go see them. We have to go see them." Hold on 1 second. And so we were extremely close, and he unfortunately passed away. He did pass away from a massive heart attack at the age of 60, and I was in 5th grade at the time. I remember the day just as clear as anything. I remember what I was wearing. For some reason, that day just stood out for me. I was excited about that day because it was a Friday. I remember I got to wear my cute pink shirt, and we found out that he passed away. I found out when I got home from school. We drove 8 hours to Alabama, and I was crying the entire time. I mean, I was a mess. So we get to his viewing, we say our goodbyes, the funeral's over, we get back home. I'm walking around in my neighborhood with my best friend, Madison, my childhood best friend, and she can vouch for this because she was there. So we were at the end of our street, where my parents live. I still live there, and at the stop sign, and all of a sudden we see my Papa Gene that had just passed away last week in a red Explorer. He drives by, he looks at me dead in the eyes, he smiles, and he waves. And then he blew me a kiss and drove off. And so Madison and I, we are just we don't know what to do. We're like, oh my goodness. We're crying, we're hysterical. We're actually trying to go search for this vehicle. We're trying to find my grandpa because it was him. So we're running around, you know, there's no way that we could have missed the car because it was a circle. So the way he was going, he would have had to come back out and pass our house. And so we're running the opposite direction, just praying and hoping we're gonna see the red Explorer. We never saw it. So we come back home, I you know, tell my mom. She's immediately like, call your grandmother. And so I call my grandmother and I tell her, I say, Nana, you know, I just saw Papa Gene in a red Explorer. And she just immediately breaks down. She goes, Marissa, she goes, right before he passed, he was saving up for a red Explorer. That's the vehicle that he always wanted. So it was confirmation. For me, it was like a final goodbye. But that is my story. It's a very positive one. And I also have a lot more stories in between there. Seems like my childhood best friend was with me for a lot of those encounters. If y'all would like to hear more, let me know. I have a lot. But this one was the most positive experience, and he was just telling me goodbye. That's all it was. But
me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, one, Audacity, I really think that video that you made is really haunted, because myself, and I know based on other videos that you made, others have had some issues trying to stitch this video with this app glitching, and I'm already at my 5th attempt because my app or this phone has been glitching seriously. Oh, but second, as I'm struggling with the glitches of this app trying to record this video, there was this massive windstorm that occurred outside, like howling outside. And unfortunately, we left the window to my bathroom open on the 2nd level, and it knocked something down to the ground. So that happened, and now it's quiet. So I don't know. I'm hoping that this goes well, but here we go. I've shared the story twice on this app, so please take it with a grain of salt, but I promise you that what I'm about to tell you really did happen. And I had justification and verification of this occurrence, and I also have pictures of it as proof or evidence, but I digress. So I've been researching and investigating the paranormal for almost 10 years. I even have a podcast talking about everything that I research and everything that's haunted in and around Los Angeles. I'm also from a very haunted city, New Orleans, so I've seen enough and had things happen to me, but nothing compared to what I'm about to tell you. In 2018, I was picking up a sewing machine from a sewing machine vacuum cleaner repair shop in Burbank, and I've been working with this company for several years. So on one particular evening, I go to the shop to pick up a sewing machine that needed repair. I go inside, I pay for the repairs. The manager, who knows me, asks if he, can help me load the machine into my car. I said yes. So he does so. We chatted outside, said our goodbyes. I get in my car and I record a TikTok to send to a friend. After I sent it, she sends me a message back saying, LOL, I like the soundbite, but who's standing in front of your car? Or it looks like someone's in your car. I don't know, but there's this weird reflection on the lenses of your sunglasses. So I'm gonna show you the still shot of the video, and I'm gonna show you the up close version as well. But when I went back to look at it, it gave me massive chills down my back, but here it is. So as you can see right here, there's a face. It looks like a face. And when I first posted this video, many people were like, no, that's your reflection. Trust me, I thought that was me too, but then I noticed, wait, I'm wearing red lipstick and I'm also wearing gold hoop earrings. And I did a close-up of this image and I'm like, that is not me though, because it looks very masculine and it looks like it has like a beard, a stubble, and it looks like whoever is in this picture is bald. Definitely looks like a man, and he is wearing these massive sunglasses. And so I send this video and these images to some friends of mine who are in the paranormal field. They're completely perplexed. They're like, Tammy, I don't know what that is, but I hope it doesn't follow you home. To which I remember sitting in my car saying, whatever was in this image or my video, you're not welcome in my space. Because at that time, I was doing a lot of paranormal investigations, so Lord knows how open I was to having these things appear in front of me, if you know what I mean. We'll get to that later. So the very next day, I'm running errands, and I stop in a coffee shop to grab coffee just to take a little break. I sit down with my coffee, and something tells me to call the shop. Right when I call, the manager, Matt, answers, and I'm like, Matt, this is Tammy. I have something to ask you, and it's all out of respect and I'm very serious about this, but bear with me, okay? Is your shop haunted? And without hesitation, he's like, yes. And I told him I caught something on my camera when I was recording a video in front of the shop. And this image that appeared on the lenses of my glasses looks like a man. And he pauses again. He's like, okay. And I asked him, what do you think it is? Like, who do you think it is? How long has this been happening? Can you elaborate? He said, yes, that's Frank. And I'm like, great, you gave it a name. And I'm like, who's Frank? And he said, well, Frank used to work in the shop a few years back, and he died on his way to work. And he died of a heart attack as he was riding his bike to work, and I was the last person that he spoke to right before he passed. And he literally passed away almost a half a mile away from the store. And ever since his passing, weird things have been happening in and around the shop, and they still happen. Things from tools in our workstations disappearing and reappearing in different places. Footsteps and a man's voice in the back room when no one's there. Lights flickering on and off and things falling off the shelves. I asked him, like, why do you think that is, Frank? He said, because this is all he knew. He was a man of very little means. He didn't have friends. He didn't have anything. He had us and this job. He said he would come back. I asked him if I could bring him the pictures and video to show him. And he said, yeah, come by tomorrow. The owner will be here and we'll take a look at it. The next day when I got there and I showed the owner and Matt the video and the pictures, their faces turned completely white. And the look that they had on their face was like they were looking at a very old friend of theirs. And they said, that is Frank. 100%. That is exactly what he looked like. And I asked him, do you have a picture of him? And they said no, because Frank wasn't the type of guy to take pictures. He didn't like his picture being taken. And he was, very old school. He had these big paw Terminator looking glasses. They were like sunglasses that elderly people wear. And we would always joke about him wearing those glasses. He had a flip phone. He had a bike. He didn't have a lot, but all he had was us and this job. A few weeks later, I go and ask a friend of mine who's a psychic medium about what happened to me. I showed him the pictures and the video, and he was like, Tammy, it makes sense because you do so many investigations that you've opened yourself so much to these things occurring. And, little do you know, you're very sensitive. Like, you're really, really sensitive to the point where you can actually see these things now. And that made sense. And ever since then, I took a little break. I definitely took a little break from it. And I still see things every now and then. But, yeah, I still, remember Frank and we'll never forget this occurrence. But like I said, take it with a grain of salt.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, this is the third time I'm trying to record this because the other times that I tried to stitch it with Audacity, her first 4 seconds of her clip about the ghost story thing, it just wouldn't pick up the audio. I don't know. It's weird. Other creators said that their phones were glitching in and out. It's really freaking strange. But anyways, I have 3 stories I want to tell. My first one is when I was a senior in high school. I moved in with my uncle and his then wife at the time, Rachel. And their oldest she was probably like 9. So it's just giving you the dynamics in the house. They had a few kids, but the oldest kid was like 9. So I was like the teenager in the house. And in high school, my best friend at the time, and one of my very best friends still to this day, Holly, she's in this. I had just gotten done talking with her for that night on the phone, right? Went to bed. In the middle of the night, I wake up because Holly is nudging me and asking me to scoot over on my bed so that her and Rachel can lay down in the bed with me. And I remember just looking at her, I'm like, Holly, what are you doing here? And then thinking like, why does Rachel need to lay in the bed? She has a bed down the hall. So I get up because I can just see silhouettes because there was a light on in the hall that was coming into my room, but the light was off in my room. So I just see silhouettes of Holly and Rachel. So I get up, turn on the light, turn around, and they're not there. I was so fucking scared. I left the light on, and it took me quite a while to fall back to sleep. The other one I want to talk about is another situation in the bed. When I was about 20, I was 25, I had just split up with my husband at the time, and I moved in with my cousin Dee Dee. Her house, definitely haunted. There were so many things that happened in this house, but I just want to talk about this one particular story. I had a room in the basement, and so did her gay brother Louis. He was living in the house with us, and he had a room in the basement too. And there was like this period of time when I first moved in with them, I just could not sleep alone. I was getting bugged a lot, and I was scared. I'm still to this day scared of the dark. I can't sleep alone in the dark. I have to have like a nightlight on or something. But anyways, for a little while I would sleep in Lou's bed with him. And one night, he's on the right side of the bed, I'm on the left. We go to bed, right? We knock out. I think we fell asleep watching Golden Girls or something, but I'm laying on my left shoulder. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I look, and there was a light, like, one of the lamps in the room was on, so there was enough light to see this. Lou is standing next to me on my side of the bed, looking down at me, and his eyes are like a reddish, pinkish, almost like somebody whose eyes are like bloodshot, and he's just staring at me. And I'm like, Lou? And then I hear, what? And like feel the bed move, and I look over, and Lou is laying in the bed next to me. And then I look back over, and the one standing next to me is gone. I was so fucking scared. Like, that made it worse. That made it worse. I didn't even want to sleep in his room anymore. Oh, man. But the third story I want to talk about is the very last thing that I've had happen to me, the most recent, which was January of 2023, I do believe. I was about to fly back home from deployment, and I was in Singapore, and they put us up in this hotel in Singapore, Navy Gateway Inn and Suites, and I was sharing it with my friend Alexis, and we each had our own room. And that day when we were showing up and getting our bags off the van and everything and checking into our hotel, there was like this pack of monkeys that we saw outside of the hotel, and we were just, you know, observing them, taking pictures and videos and stuff. Well, so that night we go into our hotel, and the hotel is huge. It's like 13 square feet. There's a few bedrooms in it, big ass living room, kitchen, all this stuff. And there's 2 doors. We made sure both the doors were locked before we went to bed. I woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning because I heard a whistle. It was like, and Alexis likes to whistle a lot. So I remember it felt like it was right in my ear. And I was like, opened up my eyes. I'm like, and then it just like sunk in. I was like, oh no, like you literally just woke up because somebody whistled in your ear. So I grabbed my phone. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's like, I look over at my door, and there's a little bit of light coming in from the hallway, and I can see a shadow walking back and forth in front of my door. And then it will randomly stop right in the middle of the door and just stand there for a few seconds and then continue to go back and forth. But I cannot hear any footsteps, no pitter patters, nothing. Because a part of me at first was wondering if monkeys had maybe climbed in through a window. But I was like frozen. And it went on for a good like 5 minutes. And then it disappeared. It just stopped. And then I laid there for like a good, another like 10 to 15-ish minutes. Because I was frozen and scared out of my damn mind. And then I finally got the balls enough to get up and turn on the light. And then I slowly opened my door. And I tell you, I went out there and I turned on every damn light in that space and checked every nook and cranny. And I made sure none of the windows had accidentally been opened because maybe it was a monkey. No windows were open. Both the doors were locked. And yeah, it was so flippin' scary. And then we came back home for a few months and went back out on deployment again. Well, now I'm on the ship and I'm talking to my buddy, Salazar, and he's like, hey, I had this weird thing happen in Navy Gateway Inn and Suites when we just stayed there last. I'm like, really? What happened? Tells the story. I'm not going to tell his story because I don't want to make this video too long. But anyways, I'm like, dude, I had something fucking crazy happen too. And then he said he had made friend with a local guy that was born and raised in Singapore. And the guy said that the Navy Gateway Hotel, they actually built it out there in Singapore on top of some burial grounds. So, yeah, that's my story.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
The story I want to tell is when I was like 8. It was 2002. I was in my mom's friend's wedding as a flower girl, and this wedding was in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And we were staying at like a very prominent old hotel. So it was like my parents, myself, my 2 younger siblings, and my grandparents. We were all going to this wedding. And on the day of check-in, I went in with my mom, and we were in the lobby. And this little girl with red hair came up to me and asked me if I wanted to play. And I felt really, really uneasy and like trepidatious about this girl, which like I never got with other kids, you know, as a kid. So I kind of remember just like brushing her off a little bit because I just got like a weird feeling from her and was like, oh, like I can't play, like, sorry, you know, like blah, blah, blah. And she was like, okay, and like went away. Then like probably like a day or two later, I was in the hotel room with my younger siblings and my grandparents, and there was a knock at the door, and so I went and opened it. I don't know why. But she was there. And actually it's kind of dawning on me why it was probably me who opened the door, but we'll get to that later. But so I went and opened the door, and this little girl with the red hair was there, and then she was also there with like a 13-year-old boy and like another preteen. And I was like, hey, and she was like, hey, like, do you want to come see where we live? And in my like 8-year-old brain, I was trying to make it make sense. I was like, oh, this is an old hotel. There's probably an orphanage here too. Like, that was my logic at the time. You know, just trying to make it make sense. So, I was like, sure. And we were on the 8th floor at the end of the hall, and there was a staircase, like right there. And so we start going up the staircase, and obviously, like, there's signs on the door, like, don't enter, staff only, blah, blah, blah. It's trespassing. And it was going up to like an attic, and I thought it was weird that they would like make kids live in the attic. But again, I was like trying to make it make sense as like a child and my understanding of the world. It was very narrow. But so as the door's like about to crack open, my grandma pops out of the hotel room and is like not happy and is like, Claire, like, you can't be up there. What are you doing? Come back here. Like, get down from there. So I turned to the kids. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't play. And they're like, okay. And so I go back. And then the day we're checking out, there's a lot of people in the lobby. You know, it's the end of a wedding. Everyone's saying their goodbyes. And the little girl comes back up to me. She was like, hey, do you want to play? And so I turned to my mom. She's talking to somebody. And I was like, hey, Mom, like, can I go play with so-and-so, or the little girl? I never knew her name. Or maybe I did, and I just don't remember. I don't know. But anyway, so And she was just like really dismissive, which like wasn't typical and like isn't typical. Like, she's always been somebody who like gives a definitive answer. So the fact that my mom was just like, you know, whatever, blah, 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 like kind of just brushing me off didn't make sense. You know, even though she was like in a conversation with somebody, like still she would have like turned around and been like, no, you can't play. Or like, sure, go play. So that was odd to me. So I turned back around to the girl and I was like, I'm sorry, like I can't play. She was like, okay. And then that was it. And for a really long time, that is all I remembered. Well, I'd like talked about it with like my mom and my grandma as like when I was older, like, oh, like, do you remember this little girl who kept asking me to play like at the wedding? And they don't remember a little girl. And like both of them have decent memories, and like you could chalk it up to like, why would they remember this little girl who kept asking you to play? Those are the kind of details that they remember. And no one remembers seeing this girl except for me. And something my mom also remembered about that trip was that my little sister would cry at nothing. And that wasn't really her MO. But she would just like get freaked out and start crying. Oh, and nothing would be there. And like nothing would really trigger it. And so my mom noted that. So I always kind of chalked it up to just like this, oh, funny little story, probably a little ghost, whatever. And then I got a little bit more curious. Like a couple years ago, I was like thinking about this story and I was like, oh, I have the internet now. Like I can look up and see like this hotel and if anyone else has a similar story. And so I looked up the hotel, don't remember the name, but like Al Capone stayed there and like a bunch of presidents and like athletes. Like it's a very well-known hotel. It burned down, like the original one burned down and they rebuilt it like, again, still a long time ago, like the 1800s or like early 1900s. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But so I got into like, oh, is it haunted? And like, yeah, people have seen this little girl before. And they've also seen like a woman in a white dress. And when I read that, like a very vivid memory came back that I had not thought about since the day it happened. But it was the day we were leaving again. All of us were in the minivan. I was in the far, far back. You know, I was in the way, way back. And we're sitting like in the parking lot getting ready to leave. And I look out my window and like at the top of one of the pillars of this hotel was a woman in white, like levitating at 45 degrees off one of the pillars, like just midair. And she was seething. She was so angry, like probably the purest form of evil I've ever experienced. And I remember being really, really scared because I believed she was angry with me that she didn't get me. And I just had to like I just sat in the back and didn't say anything because I didn't want to be like, there's someone floating off of the hotel. And so I just sat in the back and was like, it's fine. She can't get you. We're leaving. We're out of here. You know, she's not going to get you. And like, as we drove away, I felt like so much better. You know, cause like, what you going to do? But I genuinely believe like her and the little girl are the same entity. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I would have gone up into that attic. Like if my grandma didn't come out of the hotel room and tell me to come back down. So I've seen a lot of comments like this, and it is the Arlington Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I've also seen mentions of other hotels and resorts in the area, and I am not at all shocked that they would also have paranormal activity. Because I've heard that water can amplify paranormal or like spiritual activity in an area, and since it is on a like natural hot spring, it would make sense. Also, like, if it's a place for people to go on vacation, like during their life, they may have had fond memories of that area, and that may be a reason like people go back in the afterlife or after they pass. Obviously I don't think that was the case for who I encountered, but you know, people also meet like pretty shitty demises anywhere, so you know, it could be a whole host of things. But anyway, for all the comments about me talking really slow, I had just woken up when I made that video. I wasn't high. I had tried to make the video the night before and it just like wasn't working. I couldn't stitch for some reason, and I got really fed up and just went to bed and then made it in the morning. So that's why I was talking really slow. And then for being so close to the screen, I just like always hold stuff close to my face. I don't see really well. I know some of you are going to wonder, then why don't you put your glasses on and help you see better? It doesn't work like that for me. There's still parts of my vision that like just aren't there, so it doesn't really matter. Like the glasses definitely help, but like it doesn't fix it. So I just always hold stuff really close to my face, and it doesn't register in my head that it's that close because I'm just like really used to it. So I wasn't trying to scare you. Sorry. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I got for you. I have other ghost stories I will probably end up telling on here, but it's late and I'm tired, and that's a story for another day. So have a good one.
So I have another ghost story. We're gonna call this one Ghost Bath. For my second birthday, my mom had one of her friends come over. We're gonna call this friend Sharon. And Sharon brought her husband and son, and we're gonna call them Todd and Brian. Mom introduces me to these three. I really don't think too much about it, just because I'm two and it's my birthday party, and I have bigger things going on. Anyways, this was the only time I remember meeting them. So fast forward a couple months later, and my mom's giving me a bath. And I say, kind of out of nowhere, they should go. And my mom was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, Shannon and Brian, they should go. And my mom was super confused because I wasn't hanging out with Brian, you know what I mean? We weren't friends. So she wasn't totally sure what I was talking about. So she asked, who told you that? And I said, Todd. She asked where Todd was. I said, right behind you. And she quickly snatched me out of the bathtub and ran. She was so freaked out. Well, it turned out, and I didn't know this, because why would I? Todd had had a massive heart attack and passed away. So a week or so after this bathtub incident happened, my mom was on the phone with her friend, and the friend was talking about how she had planned a trip to Disney World with her now deceased husband for their son. And she was telling my mom how she didn't know if they should go on this trip. And my mom told her friend, hey, I think Todd would want you to go. And they ended up going on the trip to Disney. Now, there's a big chunk of this that, my mom has told me, but I do remember, meeting the family at my birthday, and I do remember seeing Todd in the bathroom behind my mom. I remember, he wasn't scary. I wasn't afraid of him. He just seemed ambivalent, I guess. But anyway, I remember him like having like salt and pepper hair and being like kind of stocky, and more just being there to like relay a message than anything. Like that's all he wanted to get through.
Tell me about the weirdest dream you've had that you don't actually think was a dream at all.
I've always had really vivid or odd dreams. For example, the first dream I ever remember having was a tutorial on how to have a dream. Then as I got older, like I could lucid dream, but once I figured out I could lucid dream, my brain like cut that off real quick. And I started having dreams like in the same areas, like my mind made up landscapes or cities or just places that were similar where I would have dreams. And they were all based off of real places, but I could tell it wasn't the actual place. It was just a little cartoonish or like just didn't match up quite right. So when I started having these dreams in like 2020, I knew something was a little different. For context, in October of 2019, I was in a car accident. I was just rear-ended. It wasn't too serious, but I did hit my head and got a concussion. And I figured it was just my brain healing, but I was having a lot of really vivid dreams. However, they really didn't make a ton of sense, and not in like just the wacky wonky dream way. They felt really real, and they were in places I didn't recognize. They weren't in my typical dream landscapes. So fast forward to September 2021, and I'm now going to culinary school, and I'm starting a new job in a restaurant, and I'm starting to realize the longer I work there that I am remembering these dreams, and it's because I'm witnessing the dreams play out in front of me. And what I mean by that is I would be, let's say, for example, at my station at work, working on a prep project, and next to me would be two of my coworkers, and they would be having a conversation. Well, I would recognize their conversation from my dream because I, in the dream, saw it from one of their perspectives. And these moments kept happening. Like, it wasn't super frequent. It wasn't like every day or anything, but it was frequent enough to take note. And I knew it wasn't deja vu because I had deja vu a lot when I was little. I knew it wasn't just like the same conversation had been had by the same two people over and over again. I've had that happen to me before. This was definitely like, oh, I saw this before. I saw this in a dream, and I distinctly remember this happening. The one dream in this cluster, though, that really stood out was a dream I had about someone getting hit by a car and me catching them. And the longer I worked there, I found out one of my coworkers had been hit by a car when they were going home from work. And they had always said they didn't know how they didn't hit their head. And that one really kind of freaked me out because I was like, oh my God, like I had a dream about that happening to somebody, and it was pretty much like to a T what had happened in the dream and in real life. So that one was freaky. And to this day, like, it's few and far between, but there's still things that are coming up from those clusters of dreams where I'm like, oh my God, this was a dream. Like, I know this was one of those dreams, and I've reflected a lot on it, and my thoughts are that they're like trail markers. The reason I say that is because I didn't really understand why I would see life through other people's eyes. Why am I watching other people live their life and not my life? And I think these moments were to show, like, here are different paths or trails you could take, much like you would if you went on a hike. You know, you have your different routes you can take. They're all color-coded. They have different names, but you can choose which one you want to go on. And I think these dreams were just to show, like, here are your options. Pick the path you want to go on. So I've always found these dreams really reassuring in that I picked a path that I really enjoy. Like, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. I think it was just to show, like, hey, you are on the right path. You are going in the right direction. There's multiple options within that path and direction, but you're on it.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I am not usually the type of person that would put myself out there and make a TikTok, but I've got to hop onto this trend. So throughout my childhood, I was always very intuitive, and I can say that a lot of kind of creepy things have happened to me, but there's one story that stands out among the rest. So when I was about 11 or 12 years old, my family moved into my great-grandmother's condo after she moved into a nursing home. And when we moved in, all of her things were still there. So we did have to consolidate them. And she had kind of a creepy hobby. So she would collect little porcelain clown dolls. So when you walk in the condo, there were just these little clown babies lining the stairs. So that was the first red flag I can remember. We ended up putting all of her things into one spare bedroom that was right next to my room. And you know when you walk into a room and you just feel an overwhelming energy? That's how this room felt. And I don't know, you know, my great-grandfather's war memorabilia was in there. There were a ton of old antiques. I don't know if it was just all the old stuff in there, but I felt very uneasy going into that room. And that's also where we kept the cat litter box, which was my responsibility. So I would be the only one going into this room. I would do my thing as fast as I could and get out of there. And of course, it was right next to my bedroom. So looking back at my whole experience while living in this house, a lot of things happened to me, but I didn't say anything to my family because I didn't want them to think I was crazy. But to this day, we all talk about it openly. And I think only a couple years ago, we all outwardly acknowledged the fact that this house was super haunted. So let me just backtrack a little bit. Before we moved into the house, my grandmother lived there. Excuse me, my great-grandmother lived there with her two sons, so my great-uncles, who were taking care of her while she was getting old and losing her mind. But they were just not great people. I mean, they were on drugs and bringing weird people into the house. Like, they were kind of bringing a negative energy into the house already. So on top of that, plus all of the old antiques and clown dolls, and the fact that my grandfather actually passed away right outside the home, this place just had a vibe. And the house was very old, so it kind of was creaky. You know, when the air conditioning came on, you could hear the floors creaking and whatnot, but there were some things that couldn't be rationalized. So for example, the floors were very thin, and it was a two-story house, so if someone was walking upstairs and you were downstairs, you could hear every single footstep. And there were times that I would be home alone after school downstairs, and I could hear someone walking on the floor above me. I could hear their footsteps. That creeped me out. We would put glasses on the counter, and the cups would just start moving slowly like this. My dad told me recently that that happened to him, and he would try to rationalize it like, well, maybe it's condensation and the counter's not level. And no, there was no explanation. I would also see dark masses floating around in my room at night. I would hear footsteps walking down the hallway towards my bedroom in the middle of the night. And I just kind of tried to ignore it because, like I said, these experiences were not that foreign to me, and I wasn't super afraid. I just kind of tried to ignore it so I could get some sleep. But the worst night and the most unexplainable event that happened to me while I was in that house, of course, happened around 3 o'clock in the morning. I was sharing a bedroom with my sister, and she's not open to these kinds of things at all. So when the rest of my family would talk about our experience in this house, she was kind of like, what are you guys talking about? You know, none of that happened to me, which I don't understand. But this night, I woke up from a dead sleep to the sound of footsteps coming down the hall again. So I'm staring at my door, and we would keep the door kind of cracked a little bit in the middle of the night. And like I said, everything in this house was very old and creaky. So I woke up to my bedroom door, I shit you not, opening and closing by itself this fast. Like, let's say my arm is the door, going like over and over again. And I'm just staring in disbelief. Like, is this really fucking happening right now? And my fight or flight kicked in. I just sprung out of my bed. I ran over to the door, grabbed it, flung it open, and I think I screamed and told it to fuck off. Turn on the light. I jump on my sister's bed. I'm shaking her. I'm like, wake up, there's demons in here. Like, she didn't give a shit. She's like, Lily, you're so annoying. Go back to sleep. Yeah, and that really shook me. When I exchanged these stories with my family, they had the same exact experiences. I don't know about the door opening and closing, but my dad would hear the footsteps, see the black masses. I even heard a voice whisper in my ear one time when I was there. It was very creepy. We eventually moved out of the house into a new one, and I still was having weird experiences in the next house. I'm not sure if something followed me there. It was hard for me to say if it was like a negative presence or not, because when you feel that just a presence in general, sometimes it's overwhelming and you might be scared and think, you know, this is evil or whatever. I can't say if it was good or bad, but it was definitely making itself known, and I did not appreciate that because I didn't want to be scared. But in the next house that we moved to, I would have sleep paralysis a lot. I have some scary stories with that. So I would wake up, you're still dreaming, but you know you're dreaming. You are aware of your surroundings, like you're looking around your bedroom and you feel like you can't move. You can't do anything except for talk. I could talk. So I would be dreaming just enough to hallucinate. So I would always hallucinate that there was a demon in my bedroom paralyzing me. And the paralysis was the feeling of this thing trying to enter my body, because you get this weight on your chest when you have sleep paralysis, which, pro tip, sleeping on your back, especially if you're very stressed out, can induce sleep paralysis. So it's always when I was sleeping on my back, I would dream this demon's possessing me. And I am not a religious person. I am spiritual. I have a relationship with God and all that good stuff, but I'm not like super into the dogma thing or, you know, Jesus specifically. But that was always my instinct, was I'm going to pray to Jesus. And anytime I would start praying and call upon a higher power, I would immediately wake up. Even after fighting off this thing for the longest time in my dreams, you know, screaming, pleading for help, crying, trying to move, nothing would work. But the minute I would start to pray, I would always wake up. So I'm not sure if this story is any moral, but ghosts are definitely real in my book. I think that reality is a lot weirder than we know. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I would suggest reading the declassified CIA files about consciousness and reality, and explore some alternative theories. I love the theory that ghosts are not necessarily actual people from the past or entities, but rather energetic remnants of something that happened, or even timelines overlapping with this one in the same place. So like the past, the present, and the future all happening at once, but kind of converging into this one point where it overlaps, and we can tap into that somehow. Very interesting stuff.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, I got one, because me and my dad literally just talked about this story like recently, and it still creeps me out to this day. So my dad's best friend, my Uncle Marshall, this is someone that him and my dad, they grew up together in Nigeria, all from childhood till they graduated high school. When they graduated high school, my Uncle Marshall came to America, and once he got here, he did everything in his power to get my dad over here, which he did. So yeah, thick as thieves, you know, besties. So around the time when I was like 5 or 6, I mean, my Uncle Marshall is always out the house. Like, was always at the house because him and my dad, they were young, so they were always like drinking, partying, all of that. And if my uncle was, too drunk to drive, he would just be on our couch. He would fall asleep on our couch, whatever that may be. He was always there. Even if they weren't going out and it was just late, he would just, I just knew, Uncle Marshall, he'd be on the couch. He'd be asleep on the couch. One thing, though, that I looked forward to whenever he did stay the night, even whenever he just came over, he really loved me and my siblings. He would, if the ice cream truck was outside, he's the one come on, let's go. To go get us ice cream. He's always bringing over sweets, candies, all of those things for us, presents, all of that. So, anytime I know that he's there, I know that when he wakes up, we're going to get some good stuff. But unfortunately, my uncle ended up getting cancer. And so I remember, again, around age 5, 6, us going to the hospital to go see him. He was up, he was talking, he was fine and all of that. And I just remember thinking, because I was so young, I wasn't really understanding what cancer, I didn't know what cancer was. So to me, I'm okay, he's sick, I get that, but he's in the hospital, so he's going to be okay. I didn't understand any other alternative to not being okay. So maybe a week or two after the hospital visit, one night I wake up and, just want to go lay in my parents' bed. Just wanted to go lay with them. And so as I'm leaving my room, I am walking past the living room and I see Uncle Marshall on the couch. He's laying on the couch. And at first I wasn't sure if it was him because I didn't remember him coming over the night before. So I look closer and it's dark because it's nighttime. I look closer and then he looks up at me. And so I'm oh, that is Uncle Marshall. He looks up and he just waves. And I'm and then I'm I get excited because I'm oh yes, he's here. We're gonna get some good stuff in the morning. So I was kind of excited to see him. So after I did my wave, I kept going and went to my parents' room. So once I got in the bed, so I'm trying to squeeze in between my parents or whatever. And so it wakes up my dad. My dad wakes up and so I'm trying to snuggle with him and I just tell him oh, Uncle Marshall is here. He's on the couch. And my dad's what? I was Uncle Marshall, he's on the couch. He was what are you talking about? And I'm trying to say it again because I'm confused. Are you not understanding me? Uncle Marshall's here. And as I'm saying that, literally the phone starts ringing. So my dad picks up the phone and it's literally the hospital letting him know that my Uncle Marshall had passed. So now my dad is hysterical. He's waking up my mom and they're both saying, that he's gone. And I'm I'm still not getting it. I'm he's on the couch. And my dad keeps what am I talking about? We get up, we go into the living room. He's not there because he's at the hospital. Yeah. So my dad kept asking me what did you see? What did you see? I was I started getting scared. I'm I saw him. He waved at me. He was on the couch. I was not getting it. So yeah. So that was my first encounter seeing paranormal. Rest in peace, to my uncle. That was the last time I saw him, but apparently he did come back again to other people. That's a whole nother story. If you're Nigerian, you already know it's a mess. It's a longer story, but that was my interaction. A lot of people were no, you might have dreamt it, but I was there was no reason. Why would I literally wake up out of my sleep, see him, wave at him, and 2 minutes later we get the phone call that he's gone? I don't know, but creepy.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Every time I've tried to record this, it does not work. So, guess we'll see if it works. Okay, I think it's gonna work this time. So if I had a zillion hours and a zillion days, I could tell you so many ghost stories. And about the ghosts in my home that I grew up in, and the weird prophetic dreams that all the women in my family have, and the dead people dreams that we have, and a couple alien stories. But I have approximately 10 minutes, and this is one of the spookier stories I have from recent years. So I live in one of the more haunted places in America, and there's a bunch of cemeteries here. A lot of them are like tourist attractions. This did not take place in one of the tourist attractions. This was like a regular jack-off cemetery. And me and one of my friends about 2 years ago decided to put together the quarter of a brain cell that we had and go to the cemetery super late at night, like well past midnight. And we wanted to check out the mausoleum. It was one of the few cemeteries in town with a mausoleum, and that was like open to the public. And we got there and we were walking around. We did not have flashlights, and we might have had like a little one, like one of those cheapo plastic ones that barely works. I think we had one of those. But we walked about halfway down this dark ass hallway, and we both stopped and we looked to our left, and there's this fucking tombstone. Well, like, you know, like whatever the fuck they call mausoleum tombstones, and the marble's like that fucking thick, and it was split straight down the middle, like it had fucking cracked. And we looked at it, we kind of looked at each other, and we were like, okay. And we turned back towards this dark ass hallway. We both take one step forward, and we stop and we look at each other, and we were like, we have to get the fuck out of here. Like, I don't know how it felt for them, but like, my blood ran so fucking ice cold, I wanted to vomit. So we turned around, we got the fuck out of the mausoleum, and we got back to the truck, and I was like, that was spooky. Let's play some music. I have a very old, not very old, the truck is old enough to have its own driver's license. Does not have like an aux port or Bluetooth, so I have to use a Bluetooth transmitter, and for that to work, the Bluetooth transmitter has to be attached to a radio station. Like that's on my station, and it like talks to each other. I'm not a scientist. So I have it at the normal station that I usually use. I have Cemetery Drive playing by My Chemical Romance, and it plays for a second. And as I start to drive, we start getting interference, and we realize it's like hellfire and brimstone, like church channels. And we were like, that's weird, because I don't usually get interference. And I start to inch forward, and the channel starts changing. And we start getting different hellfire and brimstone channels. Like, all of them were fucking religious channels. And we look down, and the stations were flipping on my console. Like, someone was sitting there turning the dial through the stations. And it was all fucking religious channels. And I know for a fact not all the stations in town are fucking religious channels. All religious channels. We turned that shit off. I turned my brights on. We're like, we have to get out of here right now. I turn the brights on. There's a giant fucking marble statue. Like a pillar. Super tall. A couple 100 feet in front of us. Right in front of a huge dark like area of woods. And at the very top is a fucking Jesus statue. Arms spread out, dying on like the cross, and it's terrifying looking. It looks like something out of like a creepy Tumblr post. I turn the brights off, we get the fuck out, we book it through this cemetery. Too fast for a cemetery. I want to say there was like a cat in the road too that scared the shit out of us, and we both screamed or something. But I've been to that cemetery since. I don't think I've seen that Jesus statue. I think I only saw it that night, and it was terrifying. Anyway, that's the story of how I almost shit my pants. I have lots of ghost stories if you want more, but that one I get like a little on edge every time I tell it. So.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable, but is entirely true.
So I have a lot of stories about weird things that have happened to me during my life, or, weird experiences that I've had. But the weirdest ones that I've had as of late actually have to do with my daughter. My daughter's 13 now, but when she was born, we had lived in this house that was a newer house, like maybe in the 80s it was built. So it wasn't really that old. And while she was a toddler, she was enamored with this spot on the stairs and this spot in her room. And she would sit on the stairs and she would talk to this spot all of the time. And I always had this like super creepy feeling about it. And then the same thing would happen in her room, and she'd point to this corner and she'd talk to it all the time. So we actually didn't live in that house for very long, maybe a year and a half or 2 years, because we ended up upgrading when we had another child and moved to a bigger home that we built. And it's important that I just want to make sure that you understand we built this home. Nobody had ever lived in this house before. And I think that that's where, you know, people sometimes forget that just because a home is new doesn't mean that it can't have something or some weird experiences in it. And so we've been living in that house, and ever since we moved in that house, my daughter would just stay in her room all the time. And we moved in when she was 2. And so, you know, she'd tell me things like, Mommy, I just want some alone time, or I just want to be in my room. And she would always alienate herself from me and the rest of the family, and specifically me. And it's really, you know, it was really weird because she would get frustrated with me and her and I wouldn't get along. And this went on for a while, for a couple of years, where she would just, you know, stay in her room and she'd entertain herself. And most people would be like, oh my God, that's a dream. Your daughter is like self-sufficient and self-entertaining. But it was just weird. And our relationship was really hard at that time. She had a really hard time with me and me with her. And, you know, usually you don't have those types of experiences with your daughters until you're older as a mom. And so we ended up having a friend of ours who was a Native American shaman come over, and they let us know that there was actually like a woman spirit in the house, and that this spirit thought that my daughter was their daughter that they had lost, and that she didn't like me and was threatened by me because I was, you know, acting as the mother. And that's why my daughter was being kept from me and was staying in her room. And so after having that conversation, you know, there were some things that we were told to do within the home to start to like make it known to this spirit that my daughter was my daughter and not her daughter. And one weekend I had taken the kids up to my parents' house and I was alone in our home. And the way that the rooms were set up is you'd walk to the top floor, and at the top floor there was a landing, and to the left was a loft area and the main bedroom. Straight ahead was my son's room, the laundry room, a bathroom, and then all the way down to the right side of the hall was my daughter's room. So her room was automatically like the furthest away anyway. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I turn and I see something out of the corner of my eye, and it is this figure, this dark figure of a woman. And I don't even know how to describe what her face looked like. It was one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I look at her and she just rushes towards me. It's just like she floats so fast across the hall and at me. And I literally ran into my bedroom. I slammed the door and I called my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. And I'm freaking out. I'm like having a panic attack because this spirit is trying to attack me. And it's like she knew that we were telling her that she, you know, didn't belong there anymore. And anyway, like our Native American friend ended up coming back, and they ended up doing a cleansing on the house for us, which was great. And we had to put photos of us and the family in the landing area to let, you know, the spirit know that my daughter was actually my daughter and not hers. And I didn't have any experiences after that, but it was so terrifying seeing this woman basically coming to attack me, and I have no other way to explain it, but it was probably the scariest encounter I've had with a ghost in my life. Not the only one, but probably the scariest and the most memorable. And she was definitely trying to let me know that my daughter was hers and she was going to do everything she could to take her. So anyway, yeah, ever since, my daughter's always just kind of drawn to weird things, and it's been interesting for us as a family.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So as a premise to this, you kind of have to understand how our living room is set up to understand how the story goes. So we have a staircase. It's like directly in front of the front door. You walk in the front door, you go up the stairs, or you can turn right and you can go into the living room. So we were sleeping in the living room, my sister and I. And our sofa was set up on the wall that, like, you walk in, you turn right, it's right there. You're gonna run into it if you're not careful. There's a window directly behind it. So
Our mom was a little bit of an alcoholic when my sister and I were like 7 and probably 9 years old. And we'd just gotten a new dog. My mom insisted on this huge, we're talking like probably like 120-pound Rottweiler mix. Huge, massive, scary dog. And he didn't know us yet. So he started growling at us one night when my mom was upstairs drinking, doing her thing. You know, she had a new boyfriend, so, you know. And he just starts growling at us, scaring the crap out of us. So my sister's like, look behind us, you know? See if there's something in the window maybe, like he's trying to protect us. So we turn around, we look out that window behind the sofa, and we turn back and he's closer. But he doesn't look the same anymore. I'm getting like shaky just thinking about this. He has like red eyes, and it seems almost as if he's bigger. And her and I have different perspectives on what happened here, because I thought that that was no longer the same dog. When I looked back, and I looked away from that window and I looked back at the dog, I thought this dog was different from our animal, from our pet dog. I thought it was just a demon, really. So she told me to turn the light on, and the light switch is like between the couch and the front door and on the way to the staircase. And I was like, okay, you can't reach the light switch from the couch, I'm not doing it. And she said I could either do it or she would throw me at the dog in true big sister fashion. So I did it, except the light didn't turn on, and it wouldn't turn on. So we started screaming for our mom, like top of our lungs, terrified, screaming for our mom. She didn't answer. So she was like, okay. Jackie said, okay, we need to get to the stairs. I couldn't bring myself to move from the sofa. So she grabbed my arm and she was like, we need to go to the stairs. So we ran to the stairs and the dog charged at us. And at the bottom of the stairs, I just froze. I couldn't move, I froze. So she dragged me up the stairs by my arm. And we were screaming for our mom the entire time. And that dog was chasing us, and it had these like terrifying red eyes, and it was huge. It was beyond huge. She thinks it was the actual dog, but it was possessed by something. I think the actual dog was still in the living room. Either way, both of us agree that the thing that chased us up the stairs had red eyes, and it was terrifying. So we get to the top of the stairs, and we're banging on our mom's door. We're talking like all of our body weight, screaming mom, like shaking the whole door, trying to get the hallway light to come on, just screaming for her for at least 5 minutes straight, like breaking down, sobbing. And the lights wouldn't come on. That light switch wouldn't work, and that dog was just halfway up the stairs, teeth bared, growling at us, losing his whole mind, like barking at us, growling at us. And it was so loud, just hearing the dog echo in the hallway that is the staircase, just like we don't know how she didn't hear it. And then she just opened her door. She opened her door and we turned around and the dog was just not there. She left. She asked what we needed, why we were up so late. And we told her through hysterical crying what had just happened. And she was drunk, so she thought it was funny, and she laughed at us. And then she turned on the hallway light, and the dog wasn't there. She went downstairs, and our new pet dog was just sleeping in the corner of the living room. And that is by far the most unbelievable and the most terrifying paranormal experience I've ever had. But yeah, fun story Sunday, I guess. Another one of my favorites is from when I was like maybe 10. It was in the summer, and the same dog from our last little encounter, he became an outside dog. My mom decided that she wasn't going to put the effort into keeping him parasite-free and flea-free, so she just chained him up outside and gave him a dog box, which is like a little outside house for dogs. And that was that. He came in the winters when it was like exceptionally freezing cold, but for the most part he lived outside of our house. And this particular summer he decided to adopt a cat. Not like adopt, but he would let it eat out of his food dish and sleep in his dog box, so kind of adopt. It was his cat in a way. And I wanted to keep it. And I begged my mom to let me keep this cat. And she said, no, absolutely not. I couldn't bring it inside. I couldn't get it cat food. It wasn't my cat. It was just like a neighborhood stray. So, anyway, I begged her for weeks, months, like the whole summer, let me keep this cat. She said no. So it started getting cold. It started getting around that time when we would bring the dog inside for the, speaking of cats, for the year. And I didn't want her to freeze in that kennel, so I snuck her inside and I gave her a bath. And my sister, she said, okay, you just hide in here with her and I'll go outside and I'll work on mom and see if I can convince her to let us keep this cat inside. So she did that and I was inside all by myself, and I just started hearing laughter, like little kids laughing. And I knew that I was by myself, so, you know, I just kind of froze. I was in the living room downstairs, curled up under a blanket with this cat, and I froze. And then I heard a young girl talking to a young boy about playing a game with a ball. And I was the only one inside of the house, so I know for sure this wasn't my brother and sister talking. And then I started hearing a ball bounce up and down the stairs. And they just kept cackling, laughing, like they were having the most fun of their whole lives. So I looked out from under the blanket, and all I saw was my bouncy ball going down the stairs and then getting thrown back up. And I ran out of that house so fast, like the fastest I've ever run in my entire life. I just sprinted out the front door, and when I came back in, the cat was gone. And we never saw it again. Like, it didn't get outside. I slammed that door behind me. It was just gone. My mom seems to think it never existed in the first place, because she doesn't remember it, but my sister remembers it. So I know it had to have at least been a thing. Whether or not it really existed is questionable, but I know it was something she and I both experienced.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Stitching this again because this is a really long one, but for my entire life growing up in my mom's house, there was this little girl. She haunted the house for before I was even born. I think probably before my mom even lived there. And she would like just do random shit for the most part. She was usually just stalking us. Like, she would play with our toys while we were asleep, or she would just show up in our nightmares and like creep us out really, really badly. Like, just get way too close to your face and stare at you dead on with the most fucking horrifying, soulless eyes. And when you walk into my mom's house, there was the staircase right there, and then on the left side, it was like fully enclosed drywall, and on the right side, it was like open, but there was a post right when you walk in, and then a bookcase that went all the way up the staircase. It was like open-sided. So the little girl would like come down the steps just a little bit and then poke her head into the top shelf of that bookcase just to like see what you're doing in the living room, kind of. And sometimes you'd just be minding your business, watching TV, and you see something move out of the corner of your eye, and you look up and she's just staring at you like horrifying. So sometimes we would get these night terrors. And at first we were like, yeah, sure, they're just dreams. They're just nightmares, whatever. Until they started getting so intense that like it would bother us for days later. We're talking little kids. We were traumatized little kids, so I guess the trauma probably played into it a good bit, but it was so bad to the point that I would have a night terror, and for days I wouldn't even go to school. I would not be able to function. And all that it was like you'd be dreaming, and then it would feel like you woke up. And when you woke up, you would be exactly where you fell asleep, exactly how you fell asleep, but when you turn your head, there's that little girl. And she's just way too close to you, and she's reaching for you, and you don't know what she wants to do to you, but you're just filled with this horrible, deep sense of dread that if she touches you, that's it. Like, it's just game fucking over. So you would try to get away from her, right? But you can't move. You're fucking paralyzed. So, after having these dreams for like a few months, it got to the point where we were both having them, we would discuss them, and we agreed that there was nothing that we could do to stop them other than telling our mom about it. And our mom just encouraged us. She was like, yeah, this house is incredibly haunted. Just pray more. Just accept Jesus into your heart and you'll be fine. I'm not saying that I have anything against religion, but maybe don't say that to two teeny tiny little kids that are fucking terrified of these arguably just nightmares that they've been having up to this point. So they get worse. And it starts happening when we're awake, like we're just laying in bed, and then it feels like someone sits on us, and there's like a dent in the blanket, like in the quilt. It looks like someone's butt is sitting there, like it's just indented, and you can't move, and it's really heavy. Heavier than a little girl should be. God, fucking... I'm saying fuck way too much for this. But they get worse and worse, to the point that, like, she almost looks like she's decaying as she's coming to our dreams. Like, it looks like her face is rotting. Her eyes are just, they go from sunken in to, like, skull-like. Like, they're just not fucking there anymore. And then she started to actually reach us. Like, in my dreams, she reached me. She would, like, roll me over if I was sleeping on the couch and just take the blanket off of me and then tuck it back into my waist, and when I wake up, that's exactly how it fucking is. I don't know if she ever actually existed or if I was just horrifically traumatized living in that house, but my mom still lives there, and to this day, I cannot spend the night there, and I can barely visit there during the daylight hours, because I still get the heebie-jeebie vibe that little girl was watching me.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Oh man, I have so many of these. My sister, my mom, and I all have, like, senses, you know. The very first one that comes to my mind, like, that I can remember at this moment. Okay, so back in college, I went to my friend's house to pick up something. And my friend lived in a house with like two other people. He had another male roommate and a woman roommate. And when I got there to pick this thing up, he was the only one who was home at the time. So I go in, and it's really quiet in the house. And when I was there to pick up, you know, it had to be weighed before I could leave, if you're picking up my drift. It was weed, okay? It was weed. And anyway, so we're sitting upstairs in his room, and he's, we're sort of both leaned over the scale, like looking at it as he's kind of measuring it. And it's just quiet. No one else is home besides the two of us. And all of a sudden, I hear very clearly a little girl, a voice go, Shane, Shane. Oh my God, that's, but for real. And I heard it clear as day. And, my friend was sitting right in front of me. And I like look at him, like I look up from the scale, to see if he's going to react at all. And he doesn't. And I was like, okay, well, and then I heard it again, Shane. My dog is barking. It's creepy. Okay, so then at that time I was like, hey, I think someone's calling your name. And he just stops and he looks up at me slowly. And dead serious, he goes, so you heard that too? And I was like, heard that too? What do you mean, heard that too? And he's like, I hear my name being called by a little girl all the time when I'm here by myself. And he was like, I just heard it 3 times, but I just thought I was crazy. I thought I was the only one hearing things, but you just heard that? And I was like, yeah, I just heard that. So anyway, I got what I had to get, and I got out of there real quick. The next story that comes to my mind, I was traveling back from the East Coast, visiting my family, and coming back home to Texas. And it's like a 2-day drive, especially because I take my animals with me. And so I ended up staying. I usually will stay either I'll stay at a hotel. So I booked this hotel, and by the time I got there, it was already 10:30 at night. And if you've ever worked in hospitality or anything like that, you know that there is a pretty much a cutoff time when housekeeping has to be done, cleaning the room for the next wave of guests to come in. That way, the room can be ready at a certain time for you to check in. So I bring that up because all that to say, by the time I got to my hotel room, it would have been at least 7, if not 8 hours, since housekeeping, presumably had been in there cleaning, right? So I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, I'm immediately just hit with this overwhelming smell, and it wasn't a bad smell, but it was distinct, and it was a good smell. It was cocoa butter and tobacco, and it was warm, and it was huh. And the first thing that came to my mind was my sister's godfather, John. He smelled just like that. And of course, John had died years ago, but anyway, I don't think it was. So I noticed it, right? And then I just it was late. I was tired. I knew I had to get up the next day to drive. It was going to be a long ass drive, and it always is through Texas, as anyone knows. And so my dog and I got her ready as well. So that meant me getting her dog bowl, which was a pretty, it's a heavy plastic bowl that I filled with water, and this hotel room that we happened to be in, it was carpeted with Berber carpet, it was low pile carpet. And so all this to say, I set her water bowl down, got her ready. My cat, stop, no, Pablo. Anyway, so I get my dog and her bowl and water, and it's heavy, so it's all set out and everything. And then I crawl into bed, and I'm just about to pass out. And it's just poof, I'm just hit with just this boom. It's a scent, a wall. And I was just weird. It was just weird. And I fell asleep. And I wake up in the morning and get out of bed. And as I'm walking to the bathroom, immediately I see it. My dog's water dish, which is sitting on carpet full of water, and it had been dragged out into the middle of the hotel room in the carpet. Not a drop of water was spilled. My dog hadn't touched it. Of course, how is she going to move this water bowl? And not only was that sitting right there, but there was a red ball, a red dog ball that was not mine. I didn't bring it. It's not something I own, sitting right next to it. Almost like it was for her. So it was pretty freaky. Oh, there's Pablo. And I was just okay, And again, I have so many of these stories. These are the top 3 I could think of off the top of my head. So when it happened, I was probably yeah, wow, that was yikes. But let's just, gotta get home. So that was that one. And then at another time, some other time, I happened to be in bed. I was asleep. It was early morning. The sun was just coming up, and I had just woken up. I still had another hour or 2 before I had to be out of bed. Sometimes you wake up early. It's anxiety, right? Only for me this time, I woke up because I was snapped awake. I snapped awake, and I woke up like that because it was as if someone was standing over me, blowing cigarette smoke just down over me. It was so strong. The smell of cigarette smoke was so strong that I woke up and fully expected to see someone standing over me blowing smoke onto me. That's how strong the scent was. And I was just and this, by the way, was a new home that I just moved into, and there was we discovered in the backyard there was a grave in our backyard, a headstone and everything. And so And I'm like alone. I'm alone at home. There's this grave in the backyard that's kind of creepy. This man apparently, I guess he'd been buried there in the 40s or something. And back then, it was a place you could bury a person. But that was the only guy. He was the only dead person we knew of in the backyard. And we were renting this place. Did I mention that? So it was freaky. And I was like, what the fuck? That one, I was like, wow. And so I kind of laid there and I was like, wow, what was that? That was weird. And then I fell back asleep, and then I woke up again, and I woke up to the sound of the rain. It had started raining, and I heard very distinctly out, like my bedroom door was closed, and I could hear right outside of my bedroom door, someone was walking around in my dining room / living room on the hardwood. They were walking around with boots on. So much so that I thought that my now ex-husband had come home from work early because of the rain. But indeed, no, he hadn't. I have no idea who the fuck was walking around out in our dining room, living room, right outside of my bedroom door. I don't know. I just remember laying there and listening very distinctly. I was like, wow. And I remember thinking, why does it seem like he's walking in circles? I was like, why doesn't he just come into the room? And then I thought, oh, maybe there's nobody out there.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8.
Okay, so preface, I've had my fair share of paranormal experiences. This is just one of many stories. But when I was around, probably 10 years old, I was in the backyard with my cousin and my little brother. And we were all bouncing on the trampoline, and when you would jump up on the trampoline, you could see over the privacy fence that was right next to it. And the trampoline, we had pushed it pretty close to the privacy fence because we were nosy little kids, and we wanted to see what was over. And of course, like you do that so many times, we realized that, the place had been abandoned. Later on in life, I found out it had been foreclosed, and the bank had repossessed it, but the place was an absolute... There was trash everywhere, and the bottom of the pool had been pretty much almost completely drained out, except towards the deep end. There was a bunch of black water right there, and it was filled with a bunch of trash and wood and stuff. It was really, really gross. So anyway, we were jumping on the trampoline, and it went from being a really warm day outside to all of a sudden it got really, really cold out of nowhere. And when I jump and I look up over, I see a tall hooded figure walking over an empty pool. Seeing that as a 10-year-old freaked the shit out of me, so I grabbed my brother, took off running with my cousin. We ran inside and told our moms what had happened. Of course, they brushed it off. They were like, oh, you're just making stuff up, that didn't actually happen. Meanwhile, my cousin is crying her eyes out because I looked at her when we were on the trampoline. I was like, did you just see what I saw? And she's just sobbing hysterically because she saw what I saw. And we told our moms and they didn't believe us that it had happened. So... yeah,